Hello everyone, welcome back to the Fly Team recapping semi-final action from the Women's World Championship happening in České Budějovice, Czechia. So we'll hop into today, of course, with the scores from today's game, starting with a 3-2 victory for Switzerland over Sweden. Now this was a game I would most aptly describe as the storyline for Sweden at this tournament, and it's been more or less a disappointment. You think back to their last couple games, you start off the tournament red hot, beating Germany, a tough German team, I might add at that. And then you go on and you win the group. You sweep the group and everything's looking great. You get to play a Finnish team that you'd much rather play over Czechia. And for the Swedes, I mean, it was almost storybook for them. They were looking to get into that semifinal round and in my eyes do something in the semifinals because the way that team plays, they had a shot. And what happened after the Finland game, and even going into the Finland game, they struggled a little bit, and we saw it towards the end of Group B play, where we saw Sweden take certain shifts off and really struggle a little bit here and there. But for the Swedes, it was this tournament in general really showed that they're still not quite there yet. And for me, yes, of course, Switzerland's the winner of this game. They win 3-2. But this game goes far beyond that. And I think you could see that here, where Sweden outplayed Switzerland at points, and then they kind of fell asleep at points. And each time they fell asleep, pucks seemed to end up in the back of their net, or at the very least, end up with a high-quality scoring chance again. So for the Swiss, they played a perfect game today against Sweden. And one of those games where you're coming in, you're going to have a little bit of problems in it. But still, Switzerland played the right game today to beat Sweden. And for Sweden, they just didn't have what they had against Germany. If you play the exact same way, if Sweden plays the exact same way they did against Germany, I think they end up winning this game by a lot more. But yeah, it's been the storyline for Sweden. They've had problems bringing a consistent effort, and we saw that in the Finland game where they outplayed Finland for the majority of the second period. Took one lapse, puck ended up in the back of their net. They took the entire first period off, 2-1 in the back of your net, and it's been this consistent problem for Sweden of putting forth a full 60 minutes. And that's one of the things that I've drawn, is that for Switzerland, they are a team that is in Group A for a reason. And there's a reason why Sweden's been in Group B as long as they had. It's that ability to put forth that you might not be in a competitive position, but you're going to wait it out until the other team makes a mistake. And for Switzerland today, they did exactly that. They waited for Sweden to make mistakes. Sweden got impatient, and the puck ended up in the back of your net. And for Switzerland, near perfect today is what I'd say for the Swiss. And for Sweden, just unfortunately couldn't control the pace well enough that you could avoid mistakes, because every mistake ended up in the back of their net. And the one other thing I might add is that the Stalder-Mueller line was really impressive for Switzerland today. And we saw that was really in my eyes, the defining line for Switzerland, because when that line was on the ice, the puck was hemmed in Sweden's end. Any other point in that game, Sweden was able to really put some pressure on Switzerland. But you knew as soon as that line jumped out on the ice for Switzerland that this game was going to be a back and forth one. So for the Swiss today, they do take the 5th spot. Obviously, it doesn't matter as much in the grand scheme of it, with the tournament format shifting to snake draft in next year's tournament, which appears to be in August, which is interesting. Or not August, sorry, April. But what I will say is for Sweden, it's a disappointing result. And especially, and we'll talk about the Olympics in a little bit here, but this game was designed to build some momentum for the Olympics. And for Sweden, they have a tight game with Finland, a team that's very likely to contend at the Olympics. You're going to likely have to go through them again. If not, it'll be the Czechs in the Olympics, because they're sticking with the same format, the Group A format in the Group B, where you have the top 5 in Group A and the rest of the teams in Group B. So something to keep an eye on there for Sweden, because today was not the kind of game that you want to see them play against Group A teams. Doesn't matter whether that's Switzerland, doesn't matter whether that's Finland or Czechia or the US or Canada. You play the game they did today, and they're going to get punished quite a bit at this division. So for Sweden today, unfortunate loss. For Switzerland, obviously, it's a big win. It's a morale-building win for them as they do look to set their sights now on Milan, the Olympics coming up in a little over 10 months now. The countdown is on for the Olympics. which is always a great time. Well, now we'll take a look here at the games that matter for this tournament. Second game of the day between the U.S. and Czechia. And if you didn't watch this game, it was a good one. And we had, of course, the U.S. winning this one 2-1, but this game really could have went either way. And you rewatch some of the chances that the Czechs had. And this game very well could have been a 3-2, 4-2, 5-2 game for the Czechs if they found their way to put the puck in the back of the net, if it wasn't for rolling pucks. Pucks just off the outstretched stick. That's really what this game came down to for the Czechs here. And for the U.S., obviously you want to play some winning hockey. And I struggle understanding this tournament so far. Obviously, the gap is getting closer. And what I will say is, I know a lot of people are looking at, oh, well, look, I mean, Canada, the U.S., the final again. You have Czechs and Finns. You said that at the start of the tournament. But no, this tournament isn't what it was expected to be. This tournament is so much closer. And despite the scores saying otherwise, yes, I know we're about to talk Canada-Finland game. That's 8-1 that I'm about to say was one of the closest games we saw today. But the truth is that this tournament has shown that the superpowers aren't as super anymore, and they are beatable. And I think when we look ahead to the Olympics, that's something I'm going to keep an eye on, especially for this Czech team, where they're a team that I think could very well contend for an Olympic gold medal that I don't think a lot of people would have expected, at least coming into this tournament. Yes, I know I had the Czechs causing a little bit of chaos in our prediction video, but I don't think I had them causing to the level of extent that I would have suspected here, nearly beating the U.S. beating the U.S. out of a gold medal chance for the first time in their 29 years of history at this tournament. So for the U.S. today, it's a win. And that's how I would chalk it up. They didn't play great. They've had better chances. The Czechs played really well. They shut down when they had to. They played that trap style that they're so good at. You take a weak penalty off the start, and that's the 1-1 goal for against. But at the same time, the Czechs had a chance. They go up early. Unfortunately, you take a diving penalty from Abby Murphy, and that's all you can ask for. So 2-1 here for the U.S. They will move to the gold medal. Of course, Czechs will move to the bronze medal game. We'll talk about now the second game of the day, or the third game, I guess. The second one that does matter between Canada and Finland. And, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath because it was another game. And for Canada, yes, 8-1, great. But it's the way that they're winning these games. And it doesn't matter whether it's Japan that they won 2 days ago, it was a 9-1 victory. Doesn't matter whether it was against the Czechs in the round robin. It's been frustrating to watch this team. And even against the U.S., where they just seem to fall asleep. And I don't know whether it's a coach's problem. I don't know whether it's a team problem. I don't know whether it's you have an older core around you problem. But it's a problem. And when you're about to play the U.S. tomorrow, you fall asleep for the first period and a half like you did today, like you did against Japan, like you did against the Czechs, like you did against the U.S., although the U.S. also fell asleep in that game. You're going to get buried early in this game and you're not coming back. So for Canada, I'm looking for them to play their style of hockey for the full 60 minutes. And yes, great. Doesn't matter. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but it's the one that matters for Canada. They got to the game that matters, and that's good enough for Canada. For Finland, they were, for a team that wasn't expected to do much at this tournament, I didn't have them expected to do much at this tournament. I don't think many people did. They put a real scare into Canada today, and I think that'll be something to keep an eye on. But 8-1 is your final. Canada does take it. They score a wicked number of goals at the end of the hockey game. But this team is not what it once was. And I know a lot of people think that this game is a write-off. And you look at the score, you think, hey, that game's a write-off. This game was as far as a thing from a write-off as possible. So Canada takes this one 8-1. They'll move to the gold medal, Finland to the bronze medal. Of course, Finland and Czechs will play the bronze. Canada and the U.S. will play in the gold medal. We'll talk about that in just a second here. But first to the news we go with Olympic sites. And for Swiss, they're a team that I think you look at this win and what it does more or less is that next step to the Olympic pathway. And when you look at what they have to go through in the Olympics, you're probably going to see the exact same sort of thing, where you see the Swiss get blown out in the prelims, then they'll have to play a game against either Finland or Czechia. I'm going to go on a hunch here and say that team is going to be the Finns in that fourth spot in Group A. You know, the Czechs will probably play the Swedes. You'll probably see Canada and the U.S. 1-2. You'll probably see Germany, Japan, maybe even a Russia, depending on if they're back, depending on what the IOC rules. Fighting for those second and third spots in Group B. But I think this Olympic Swiss team has their eyes on a potential upset here in the Olympics, especially after what we saw today, where they can appreciate they probably aren't going to win a heck ton of games at this tournament. But we saw them play against the Finns, and I think when you look at that opponent, they do have a shot to make the semifinals and play for a medal here. So for the Swiss, obviously not the tournament you had hoped, playing in the placement game. But at the same time, they got the game that they needed to. You know, they still retain fifth spot, which we sort of already talked about. Doesn't matter a whole ton, but to me it matters in terms of morale heading into a very important tournament for them coming up in just over 10 months now. We are getting closer to the Olympic Games. And speaking of the Olympics, let's talk about Sweden with Olympic doubt. And for Sweden, this tournament for me was going to be their coming out party. And we were going to see that Swedish team. In many ways, we're going to see that Swedish team and the German team come out and play. And I think in many ways, we saw that German team after their first game come out and play. I don't think we saw the same from Sweden. I think we saw Sweden get progressively worse. You know, the Norway game, you kind of come back up. And then the Finland game, you didn't play great. Probably should have won that one. Played against the Swiss. Probably should have won that one. But they did show signs that they're a team that can contend. So as far as doubts go, I don't think they beat the Czechs. Just from what we've seen at this tournament especially, they have a young, inexperienced core who in my eyes play like a Group B team. I have very difficult time seeing them fight through this division after how we saw them play against these Group A teams. But of course, plenty of time to change my mind on that, especially there's no way better to shut me up than to go out and do it. So for Sweden, Olympic doubts, a little bit worried about that. But on the other side, for the Czechs, they are a legit threat now. And, you know, we talked about coming in, they're a team that was going to put a scare into some teams at this tournament. They put some scares into teams at this tournament. And what I will say is I would expect them to be okay. And as far as the bronze medal goes, I expect them to likely win the bronze. I don't think that's much of a surprise to many people. The Czechs have looked better than the Finns at this tournament, and I think despite the round robin result, I do expect the Czechs to come back and win this one. Just the way that we've seen them grow at this tournament alone. You know, you play Canada, you hold Canada, and then the game gets out of hand, sure, but you hold Canada. You nearly beat the U.S. today. You put a scare into the U.S., take out the penalties. You put a real scare into the U.S. In round robin. Then you almost come out and beat them in the playoffs. This Czech team is a scary one that I think just had an off game against Finland. Don't be surprised to see the Czechs blow out the Finns in this one. Then to Finland we go with causing a little bit of havoc. And for Finland, we talked about it a little bit already, but not a team expected to do much. They found ways to battle, and that's exactly what they need to do, especially if they want to make a run this year, or next year rather, at the Olympics. They have to play the exact same way. So something to keep an eye on there. Obviously, February tournament for the Olympics. So we'll see. Finland can make a mark at that one as well. And then for the Canada and the U.S., it is the one that matters. And we made it here. I don't think... You can rewatch my prediction video if you want. I don't think I was going to predict that result of how close we got here. I expected Canada to still play well enough to get themselves to this point. You know, I did see that the Czechs were going to put a scare into one of these teams. I said that multiple times. So I guess it was the U.S. rather than Canada this time. But what I will say is, yeah, this tournament has not been one that's been friendly to Canada or the U.S. And yes, the U.S. sweeps the division. Great, good for them. Canada wins 3 of their 4, losing to the U.S. But anyone who watched this tournament knows that the U.S. and Canada still haven't played their best games yet, and I'm very interested to see. You look at 2 teams that have struggled playing, and for Canada, you might lose Darryl Watts due to suspension. High hit today. You got the 5-minute major on top late in the game. A really unnecessary hit, but still, that's where we're at, and it's kicked out of the game. We've seen what the Iihf has done in years past. Would not surprise me to see her get suspended. But that's a big goal-scoring piece that we've seen to sort of turn the momentum around in a couple of these games for Canada that you're going to be missing. So for Canada, for the U.S., it's about who brings their game for the full 60 minutes, because to this point, we still haven't seen a full 60-minute effort in my eyes from either of these teams. So for Canada, for the U.S., just please play a good game tomorrow, because I'm sick and tired of seeing 2 teams just sort of dogging it out there. I know that they bring out the best in each other. It's the gold medal. It's easy to wake up for. But please just play proper hockey tomorrow, because it's been a tournament of disappointment, I might say, for these 2 teams. So that's what we have here for the news. Flip over now to the playoff bracket, where we will see, of course, Canada and the U.S. in playing for the gold medal, and then Finland and Czechs playing for the bronze. As far as these matchups go, I expect the Czechs to take their game over Finland. Yes, I know what happened in the round robin, but I do think that the way the Czechs have been trending throughout this tournament, add in the factor of them playing on home ice in a medal game, I think you're going to see the Czechs play a very different game and really come out and take it to the Finns in this one. As for the gold medal, I'm going to make my prediction. I'm going to say Canada wins in overtime. I don't think we're going to see these 2 teams play a terribly great game tomorrow. I just think what we've seen at this tournament has shown that they're still not 100% there yet. But I do expect Canada to win I expect one of these teams to win in overtime, honestly, because the way this tournament has trended, I don't think we've had an overtime game. We have not had an overtime game yet, so it would not surprise me to see the final one be the overtime game. But now we'll talk about the time. So bronze medal is at 8 a.m. Remember, Czechs and Finland. It's going to be a good one. And you're on home ice. You got the home Czech crowd, which is always entertaining to be a part of. And as for Canada and the U.S. at 12 o'clock noon, all times are in Eastern Standard Time. Going to be a good one. I don't have a ton of predictions today, to be honest. I mean, as far as my predictions have gone at this tournament, I just haven't quite been there yet. I had Sweden very close with Finland. I had Sweden beating Switzerland today. I've got to the point now where I'm starting to realize that maybe predictions aren't quite my thing. Don't worry, we'll be back with a prediction video for the men's U18s coming up in a couple days' time. But the thing is that the Czechs, the Finns, I'm taking the Czechs. For Canada, U.S., that game is, as always, the biggest coin flip you can take a guess on. I'm going to go with the jerseys behind me. I'm going to go with my hat. I'm going to go with this jersey. Give me Canada in OT. But that'll do it for our coverage of our standard coverage. And now I'll flip into live questions. We have one question today from NJ Wizards, who says, do you think Sweden will end up switching coaches? And as much as I think that's a possibility, I don't know. I think this year's team was a young team, and I think you can write it off as that. I think you give the coach, you give him his time at the Olympics. I think if Sweden fails to make it out of that quote-unquote Group B, I think you see the coach gone. I don't expect him to be sticking around too much longer for Sweden. But at the same time, I think there is a potential where, you give them an extra year, you let them sort of find their groove a little bit more. And we saw flashes of what Sweden can do at this tournament. It's just about finding ways to hone that for the full 60 minutes that I think could really be the difference changer for Sweden. They're not a bad team. They just haven't been able to produce consistently. And the only consistent game we saw was against Germany, where we saw them basically dominate the entire game from start to finish, which is unfortunate for Sweden, because obviously they would have liked to win any of the games leading up to this final, and of course the The quarterfinal game against Finland was a big one. They couldn't pull that one off. Found a little bit of sleep in there. In Switzerland, you would have liked to win the placement game. Yes, doesn't mean a ton, but means something to the program overall, because when you lose that game again, the placement game, then these questions start arising. And it's about, well, are they really contenders or are they pretenders? And that's really what the unfortunate part about this Swedish team was, is that they just couldn't seem to find it. So that's what we have here for today's video. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Feel free to drop a like. If you're subscribing, tell all your friends and comment down below your thoughts on semifinal action to the National Championship. Until next time, see ya.